sort of marked time in my life by November 5th, 1975. Small, 4 feet or less. Some people just keep telling themselves that things can happen. Go to justice first and the facts.
So what do you think? You like it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Did you like it?
Yes.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Great. Now you guys have the opportunity to have... agora vocês todos têm a oportunidade de ter esse livro que já está desde o começo do evento à disposição de todos. Ok? O Travis já passou o dia autografando, embora cansado da viagem de ontem, da epopeia dos Estados Unidos até aqui. Ele passou o dia autografando e vai passar o dia de amanhã também autografando para vocês que queiram. Tá? Então eu apresento a vocês e peço uma salva de palmas generosa. Travis Walton.
November 5th, 1975 was a day that changed my life forever. It began as an ordinary work day, but we had no idea what the shock and fear and confusion we would be feeling by the time the day ended. We finished up a day's work, working in the woods. Up in the mountains of Arizona. Now, Arizona is not all desert and cactus. There's the largest ponderosa pine forest in the world there. And we were working high up on the rim there. And we'd been hearing shots in the distance because it was deer hunting season. So as we were headed home, it was starting to get dark. And we could see glimmers of light coming through the trees ahead. And at first, you know, we weren't extremely alarmed by it because although it was something out of the ordinary, we didn't know what it was. But the closer we got, the more it just wasn't adding up. If it was deer hunters, it wouldn't be so high up. You'd just see little bits of light coming through the trees. And I said, Mike, hurry up and get up there, because I could see a break in the trees ahead where the light was coming across the road. And we got up there to where this clearing in the trees was, and there it was. It was unmistakable. This was not some little ball of light off in the distance. This was less than 100 feet away. It was the most awesome sight. I mean, it was fascinating and beautiful at the same time. John Willett, one of the crewmen, was saying that he compared it to like a brand new sports car. And, you know, everybody, you know, looked for words to try to express the beauty and fear that we had at the same time. But as soon as we saw it, Alan Dallas, one of the crewmen in the back, yelled out, "It's a flying saucer!" Because there was no mistaking. You know, the skeptics who say, well, the planet Jupiter was high in the sky at that time, maybe that's what they saw. But yeah, that's a totally ridiculous explanation. This thing was hovering less than 100 feet away, from here to the back of the room. And I thought it would take off right away. You know, when we're driving through the woods and we see an animal, we call the attention of the other crew members to it. And before they can even look, it's gone. So I was thinking by the time I got close to it that it would be gone. But the closer I got, I could see it wasn't leaving. And I was becoming more and more fearful. And the guys in the truck were getting more and more scared the closer I got. And they were yelling at me to get away from there and swearing at me to get back in the truck. But when I got up close, I was looking up at it at like about a 45-degree angle. And it was making this strange sound, a mixture of high frequency sounds and low frequency, off the range of human hearing on the high end and the low end. A sound you could kind of feel rather than hear, in addition to what we were hearing. And the guys in the truck said it seemed like something was about to happen. And it wasn't just because I was getting dangerously close to this thing. It was also because I think that there was some kind of an electrical charge building up in the air that you can kind of sense. It suddenly got louder and started to move. And so I jumped for cover. I went into a crouch and moved forward towards it a little bit, but down behind a log. So the crew was swearing at me and yelling at me to get back in the truck. So when I raised up to run back to the truck, that was when my head was closest to the craft. And I think what happened right there was that there was some kind of a charge that built up that jumped from the craft through my body to the ground. And it was much more violent than you see in the movie. The movie shows a spotlight come on and sort of hold the actor there and then toss him back. And it's surprising that Hollywood would ever play something down rather than exaggerating it. But the crew said it was more like I'd stepped on a landmine, like a grenade. It was a blast of energy that was so violent that they immediately were yelling at each other that it had killed me. I mean, there was no doubt in their minds that they were seeing somebody get killed. And my body went flying through the air, tumbling through this blast ball of energy, and landed all limp in a way where I wasn't even trying to protect myself because I was unconscious. And so they took off. And that's totally understandable. It would be silly for them to risk their lives to try to save a dead man. So they took off and went until they, could no longer see the craft. And then they, started to realize they were going to have to, do something. But they saw some deer hunters go by, and they first tried to go catch them, hoping to get somebody with guns to go back with them. But they were unable to catch the deer hunters, so they went back. And they were unable to find me. They said they called and looked, and at one point the crew boss broke down and was crying. And it was an extremely emotional situation for them. And when they went back to town, they were debating what to do. Some guys on the crew were saying, well, let's just get some friends with guns, and then we'll come and look for him, and then if we can't find him, then we'll report it to the authorities. But the older guys on the crew understood that if they didn't go to the law enforcement immediately, that it would look really bad for them if they didn't report it immediately. So they did go and meet with the sheriff that night. And the sheriff and his men were definitely very impressed with the fact that something terrible had just happened. But they suspected that there had been like a chainsaw murder, and that these guys had killed me, at least one of them, and all of them were getting together to cover it up for some reason. And so during the search that went on for the next 5 days, involving men on horseback, dozens of men on foot, four-wheel drives, tracking dogs, airplanes and helicopters, combing the area looking for me. the suspicion that this was a murder grew, and the men were subjected to more and more specific accusations from the townspeople and even from the lawmen. Each crewman that was in on the search was accompanied by an officer who pressed them to fess up, tell who really did it, you know, encouraging them that if they were covering up for someone else murdering me, that they would be found just as liable. Well, so the men said, we'll do anything you want to prove it. You know, give us truth serum, give us lie detector tests, whatever. So the sheriff brought in the state police lie detector expert, the top man in the state of Arizona, one of the top in the nation at the time, to test the men. And when they passed, the president of the American Polygraph Association said that the odds were over 1,000,000 to 1 of there being any kind of a mistake when you've got 6 people passing tests on the same issue. But now there's been over 16 passed tests. I've passed 5 of those from 3 different examiners, all of whom had many years of law enforcement experience. But for some, it was never enough, no matter what. And it brings up the question that was raised at the time. Dr. Harder, who performed the hypnosis on me, said that the testimony of 6 people would have been sufficient in an American court of law to convict someone of murder, perhaps even to bring them the death penalty. So why, when they're reporting a UFO incident with lie detector tests, is suddenly the standard raised so much higher? So, you know, there's definitely a difference in standards there that needs to be examined. But when I first regained consciousness, I was on board the craft, but I didn't know it. I didn't know where I was. I was in a lot of pain. I was lying on my back. I didn't remember where what had happened. Then I remembered approaching the craft. But I thought maybe I'd been hurt in running away and that the crew had taken me to the hospital. I knew I was on some kind of a raised surface and there was a light above me. And even though the light wasn't really bright, it hurt to look at it, so I would close my eyes. Plus, my eyes were all blurry and my vision was not clear at all. But I could hear the sounds of movement around me, and I thought I was probably on some kind of a gurney or an operating table. And I thought that the sounds of movement around me were the doctors. And when I could finally focus my eyes, this is the polygraph examiner that tested the men. And, he was interviewed here recently and, said, I will stake my reputation that those guys are telling the truth. And this is long after he retired from the state police. Then I could clear my eyes and I saw these creatures standing around me. And it was just such a shock, adding to the pain that I was already feeling. I really have to explain why I lost control so greatly. The fear was so over the top because I was having trouble breathing. I couldn't get enough air. When they capture and interrogate terrorists, they waterboard them. And basically, it's the one thing that does the least harm that causes the greatest fear. Because the feeling of suffocation gives a type of fear that's impossible to reason away. On a very instinctive level, it's the most life-threatening kind of a feeling you can have, and I was struggling to breathe. In the movie, the actor is shown on a table with a membrane over his face. Now, there was no membrane, but I think that did a better job of communicating to people the source of my fear, this feeling of suffocation. On top of the pain I was feeling, on top of seeing this alien face so close to mine in a dimly lit, claustrophobic, small, cramped space, feeling so trapped. I just completely lost control. I was out of my mind with fear. Many people, you know, think, well, they would do better. They would stay calm and ask good questions, pick up a souvenir. But, you know, I guess you'd have to be there. But, you know, that's the reason I was so out of control with fear. I was not rational at all. I tried to hit him away, but I could hardly move. I felt so weak that when I went to hit him, he just fell back into the other one so easily, even though I could barely move my arm. It was more of a push than anything. And just the fear gave me enough strength to roll off the table, and this thing they had over my chest fell off, and I stumbled back and bumped up against a little narrow workbench or shelf against the wall. And I just looked to see what I was bumping into, and I could see these instruments there. And this picture cuts off the top of it. It's, you know, in the book. But I grabbed the biggest thing there to fend them off with. And I started swinging at them and screaming, threatening them not to come any closer. And they weren't close enough to hit, but I was making it clear that they shouldn't come any closer. So they stopped. And when they stood there, staring at me like that, that was the source of all my nightmares after I returned. This horrible feeling that I got from that. This kind of invasive, intrusive feeling of them penetrating my mind in a way. They were all pretty scary. I was interviewed for the new movie, 701 the movie. It's a big new UFO movie that's going to be out. And the girls from Zimbabwe were there, the school kids who saw that during recess. You know, there's 60 kids that saw it. And I asked them about what the aliens, what that felt like. And they said with the stare was the communication, but it wasn't excruciating for them. And I think the reason it was so painful for me is because that energy that hit me caused a disruption in the brain in a way that kept them from controlling me. So they were not able to make me lay back on the table or you know, in many cases they're able to control people. But it wasn't working on me, even the three of them combining their power. So one other thing that supports that is that I had an EEG done right after I was returned. And this was done by Barrows Neurological Institute. It's a world-famous brain trauma hospital in Phoenix, Arizona. And the technician was not told who I was because there was so much media hysteria going on that it was necessary to do that just to, you know, keep from stirring up too much attention. But it was also very useful because the technician did not know who I was or what he was looking for. He was just looking for signs of some kind of injury. And there was, on that EEG, an anomalous pattern that he put in the report. And so I'm going to have another test done in the near future to see if that effect is still there. It actually would be kind of handy if it was, if it does keep them from controlling me. But I would also like the old EEG to be reviewed by a neuroscientist who might be able to explain it in terms of comparing it to someone who's been electrocuted or hit by lightning, that kind of thing. And so that's a lot of the follow-up research that needs to be done. But I was desperate, just out of my mind with fear, to get out of there any way I could. And I pieced together, you know, my path in fleeing. When they decided to leave me in that room, they went out down this passageway to the right. And so I went to the left, thinking that they would come back. But I was so terrified that they would be behind me, pursuing me, or maybe even in front of me, and I was running into something worse, that I was kind of torn between running and not running. And so it was all cramped, and it was just a panic. I even went past one doorway that might have been an escape route, probably more likely than what I finally settled on. But I looked into this room, which couldn't have been a way out, but I didn't know that at the time. saw doorways that I thought maybe if I opened them, I could just drop to the ground and I would be back in the woods. Now, it's doubtful if this craft was in the woods at the time that I was trying to find my way out. But I didn't know that, and I wasn't thinking very clearly anyway. And so, entering this room, I figured out that you could see some kind of a star map or star pattern projected on or viewable through the walls, but only visible from the center of the room where this chair was. So, but the chair was the only source of controls. When I went to the doorways on the opposite side of the room, I found no doorknob or button to open it. So I was thinking that maybe the controls on this chair would open a door and allow me to escape. So I tried the controls, which was probably very foolish. It could have caused a real disaster. But nothing was working very much. But something caught my attention from behind me. The door had just come through. And I looked, and there was what looked like a human being to me. I thought immediately, I just assumed that he was somebody from Earth, that somebody there to rescue me, take me out of there, away from these horrible creatures. So I went up to him and just screaming hysterically, yelling all these questions, and he seemed very uninclined to reply. But I thought for a minute, and I thought maybe it had to do with the helmet. Maybe he couldn't hear with that on, or couldn't speak with it on. So when he wanted me to go with him, I was only too willing, because I wanted out of there. So when he took me out of there, he took me through this thing that I think was probably an airlock, because when we got on the other side, the air was cooler and much easier to breathe, and it was much brighter. It hurt my eyes when we got outside. But it was outside of the craft, and it was parked inside of this huge, it was either a hangar, like an airplane hangar, or maybe part of a larger craft. But the back wall curved up to become the ceiling, so it was shaped like a fourth of a cylinder laid on its side. And I tried to look around, but he seemed to be in quite a hurry. He was pulling me along faster than I was very unsteady on my feet and very weak. So I had to pay a lot of attention to where he was taking me. Plus I was very anxious about where he was taking me. And I looked around, and there was 2, maybe 3 other crafts inside there, but more rounded and shinier than the one we came out of. He took me down this hallway, and left me in a room with some other human-looking people. And this was an improvement for me, because they weren't wearing helmets, and I thought somebody could answer me. I was so desperate to know what my situation was. Was I still in great danger, or was I rescued? Well, they wouldn't answer me either. And so I started to resist. I started to fight back. But they were trying to get me to lay down on this table, and they put a mask over my face, and boom, I was out really fast. And when I woke up, I came to pretty